Welcome, everyone, to Dead Talk Live. And today we have a special guest, Ben Schnetzer from Why the Last Man. Ben, thank you for being here with us. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm doing all right, John. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
It's our pleasure. And you know what? Your character, you are the last man. How does it feel to have your character be a part of the show's title?
It's pretty far out, man. It's pretty wild. Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, it's such an exciting piece of source material, and the adaptation that Eli has created is such an exciting and intriguing and compelling world. And so it's just a thrill, man. This has honestly been like one of my favorite jobs I've ever done. It's such a great group of people and such a fun character and such a fun team that it's been a thrill. It's been a real thrill.
It looks like a blast, and you guys have a blast. I had the honor of talking to you and your castmates and the crew a couple of weeks ago at New York Comic Con, and you
That's
guys
right.
are just like one big family. Now, like you said, the show is based on the comic book adaptation. You play Yorick Brown, who is the last
Mhm.
man. Were you familiar with the source material when you auditioned, or was it afterwards that you got familiar with the material?
I wasn't familiar. I had heard of it. I hadn't read it. I had heard of it when I auditioned, but I hadn't read it. And so it wasn't until I got the part that I dove into the source material and acquainted myself with it much more intimately. And so, but yeah, the pilot itself, I read that I think when they were casting, and it was just so strong, and it was so clear that Eli had a nuanced and exciting vision for the piece. And I think any adaptation is a conversation. It's a conversation between source material and the adapters. And I just really loved what Eli was bringing to the table, and I loved the ways in which she was the ways in which she wanted to realize it on screen, and the ways in which she wanted to update it. And so, in our adaptation, Yorick is not he's not the last man, he's the last cisgender man. And so
Yes.
what makes him an outlier, and what makes him stand out isn't his like maleness. It's more the fact that he's this scientific anomaly.
Hmm.
And so there was such richness and depth in that conceit and in the world. And so yeah, it's rad. And it's been really fun as well, using the source material as a resource. And
Hmm.
it was amazing when we were at Comic-Con. That was the first time that we had all met Brian. And
Ah.
so Brian Cable, who wrote the graphic novel. And so that was it was weird, man. It was like meeting your dad. It was like really far out. And so that was very fun. It was a wild weekend Comic Con. I hadn't been back to New York. I'm from New York, and I
Me
hadn't
too.
been back in like forever. And so it was really, really gnarly going back, and going to the Javits Center and doing the whole round table situation. And it was fun, man. I really enjoy Comic Con.
Same here. I'm born, raised in Queens, and I haven't been back home since 2019 because of COVID. So it was great to be able to go back home. It was a real
Yeah.
treat.
So where are you in LA now?
No, I actually am just outside Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia, but I commute back and forth
Cool.
from New York. I own my house there in Queens, my childhood home. So it's home, and not being
All
able to
right.
go home for over 2 years, it's the longest stretch that I have
I
gone
know.
through, not being able to go back home. And it was just amazing to go
I
back and
know.
feel the vibe of the city.
It's wild. It was the same thing for me too. I had been out of New York for 2 years, and I'm a born and bred New Yorker, and it was the longest I'd ever been away from the city. So it was yeah, it was a big deal. The kind of homecoming was wild.
That's awesome. Now, it took a while for a network to pick up the series. Why do you
Mm,
think that is? Eli had to work very hard and pitch it to get it picked up, and it was.
mm.
But why do you think there was so much hesitation for somebody to pick this up? And it's such an amazing show.
It is. Thank you for saying that. I don't know. I think a lot of this stuff, it just, it's a miracle that any movie gets made or any TV show gets made. Period.
Yeah.
And I think there's a degree of versatility that comes with this source material, and that comes with the very basic bare bones premise. And there are some plots, there are some ideas that get written on paper, and you look at it and you go, "There's pretty much one direction that this story can take." Whereas with something like Why, there are just so many different directions it could take, so many different flavors the world could take on. And so I think, I imagine kind of since it was written, I know there have been talks of adaptations for the past like 2 decades. And, it takes a long time. It's a long, I can't really speculate as to what, like, I don't know kind of how close some things got. I know for a while they wanted to turn it into a movie.
Yeah.
And then, TV over the past 20 years has just taken on this whole new identity. And I think something like this that has so much story and is so serialized is really perfectly suited for television. And but beyond that, there's a million and one reasons why it takes a long time for something to develop. And I don't know, but I know it was wild when I finally got the call that I had booked it and was getting ready to rock and roll, and it was getting ready. We shot it in Toronto to go to Toronto. And then I think, what was it? It was like 2 weeks afterwards, everything shut down because of COVID, obviously.
Yeah.
And so that was like another chapter in the.
I think there you go.
But yeah, it's interesting that it's so fascinating. The stories, the story behind the story,
Yeah.
like why, how things come to be, and that's wild.
It is wild. It's absolutely wild. Now, for someone who has never watched the show, how would you describe your character, Yorick? Okay, you play. How would you describe it?
I would say Yorick is like I had mentioned before, so this cataclysmic event happens and it decimates, it wipes out every mammal on Earth with a Y chromosome, except for Yorick Brown, this young man who lives in Brooklyn, and his pet capuchin monkey. And Yorick is an aspiring escape artist. He teaches magic, and he's working on an illusionist show. And he's a bit of he's had a bit of a silver spoon growing up. He's definitely been the beneficiary of a lot of privilege, and he gets shouldered with what in his view is this burden of being this scientific outlier and having to bear the brunt of this responsibility. And he does not do it willingly at first. Yeah. And he's very from the outside you look in and you go, oh my gosh, how ungrateful or spoiled. But I think for him, he's a little bitter about it. And everybody's dealing with so much trauma after this event has happened. But he's, shouldered with the task of having to venture across country, being shepherded by a special operative who is tasked with keeping him safe.
And Ashley is awesome.
Hopefully, who played by Ashley Romans, and hopefully inside him somewhere is the answer to
why he survived. When we first met,
but sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, when we first meet Yorick and he's asking money from his sister, he's kind of a moocher, a loafer. He wants to be this magician. And then this cataclysmic event happens. You are the last man alive. And you get found. Your mom, played by Diane Lane, is now the president. We're going to get to her in a second. And you basically say, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be the last hope for mankind, the end of the species. And I don't want it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to. I don't want to find someone else. And they're trying to convince you there is no one else. You're it. So whether you like it or not, you got to do this. So how do you get into the headspace to, when your arc first started to where you are now?
It's such an interesting, it's an interesting question that, like, I think there's this imaginative leap that we all took. And I think we may have chatted about this a bit when we were at Comic-Con, but we had Louise Friedberg, who directed the first two episodes. When we were getting ready to shoot the pilot, she had said to us, she was like, I don't think these characters know that they're in a TV show. And that really resonated, I think, with a lot of us. And I think at each step, when these huge cataclysmic events occur, so rarely do we have nothing like this has ever happened, but there are things that you can draw parallels from. And very often we're so confined to our immediate world and our intimate world. Very rarely do we take a step back and really try and digest the global impact of something. And so I think for Yorick, I think he's convinced that this can't be true.
Mm-hmm.
And, in that scene when it all gets revealed to him, I think we wanted there to be, weight to the fact, like, he doesn't know what story he's in. These characters don't know, we know the title of the show, but he doesn't. So when Diane's character, President Jennifer Brown, says to Yorick, we found plenty of men, none of them with a Y chromosome. He doesn't know that that's the show. He doesn't know that's what the show is about. And so we really wanted there to be a big, real seismic shift when that happens. And I think for a lot of the series, I think he's in denial about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think he thinks it's a fool's errand that they're on. And again, to me, it's always much more compelling when the hero in the hero's journey is kind of reluctantly on that journey. He's not the Luke Skywalker who's kind of sitting there like dreaming about bigger things, and then this thing happens. Like, he's very much happy not doing anything big. And like you said, he's a bit of a moocher, a bit of a loafer. And so it's an episode at a time, taking in these new, and finding moments where the penny drops for him or something shifts for him as far as his relationship to the new world order.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense. I like the fact that it's not just this not only affected humans, it affected every animal with the Y chromosome. And I'm glad they stuck with that with the TV show. They could have kept it just humans. I mean, it's, I like the fact that it affects the entire planet, all mammals with the Y chromosome. What were your feelings on that?
That's a really good question. In episode 5, there's a great, so we meet this character as a huge part of the graphic novels and ends up being a huge part of the series. Dr. Allison Mann, played by Diana Bang. We meet her in episode 5, and she's got a really wonderful speech about the massive impact that this event has had on, like, biodiversity. And it's not just about the human race, it's about, the animal kingdom. And it was I remember shooting that scene, and Diana is just such a wonderful actress. She's so good in the show.
Oh yeah.
And every time she would do that speech, kind of getting hit by new things, finding different moments in it. And it is again, I think it's important when you're telling a story, you intimately acquaint yourself with it, but then you have to, like, as an actor, like, you have to unknow it at some point.
Yeah.
And so there is there's so much space to take a step back and, like, take in the big picture of what we're talking about here. And I think it's intense and it's full on. I think especially given, like, the state of the climate right now, like, there were times when it was like a very heavy
Yeah.
a very heavy world to live in when we were
Yes.
filming.
Now, how do you feel about this show tackling some very hard issues? And I applaud the show for doing this when it comes to transgender, uh, empowering women and having a predominantly female uh, cast and crew. How do you feel about that approach that this show took?
I'm really proud to be a part of it. Just really proud to be a part of it. You know, it was very clear from the outset that Eliza Clark, our showrunner, you know, the vision she had for this adaptation was she wanted to create a world that was gender diverse and that was inclusive and that was a clear representation of the world that we live in. And I couldn't be prouder to be a part of it, you know. And again, it's interesting, you know, I don't know the group of individuals that we worked with on this show is just one of the most inspiring and talented and hardworking group of individuals I've worked with ever. And yeah, it's you know, you've done this a long time. Usually the gender balance is not, you know,
It's not equal.
usually a lot of males,
Oh, yeah,
cis males, who are, you know, calling the shots.
exactly.
And it's friggin' unfortunate that that's the case. And it's just really nice. I mean, it was a very special experience working on this one, and
Nice.
really proud to have been a part of it.
It is special. Now, you dropped a bomb at New York Comic Con that took everybody by surprise. Ampersand is
Yeah,
CGI.
yeah, man.
How does it
Yeah.
talk us through? How do you physically interact with something that is not there? Oh, you froze up for a second. There we go.
It's been we're back.
Yeah, we're back.
It's That's such a good question. And again, I'm shout out to Stephen Pugh and Jesse who are the VFX team on Y. They were the kind of like my point people. Yeah, it's funny. I did a lot of these where we would sit down and people would be like, "So is it true that Ampersand is Marcel from Friends?" And I was like, "No, that's not. No, he's CGI." It's really fun. Like when I first found out that Ampersand was going to be CG, I was a little disappointed. And then I took about 3 seconds to think about it, and I was like, "Oh my god! Imagine like every day showing up to work." And I'm a big animal lover, but having to do like all of my scenes with a primate would be so intense. Like when you're working with animals or when you're working with children, like basically the scene, the actual practicalities of making the scene becomes about like, does the animal hit their mark? Did the kid look? Did the kid not look at the camera? And then basically that's the take that they're going to use every time. And so I was quite relieved when I actually digested and metabolized the idea that we were going to be doing CG, and it's just really fun. It's like it's imagination and it's make believe, and it was really fun to be able to, you know, the resources on a show like this are really amazing, and so being able to like chat to animal trainers about how you'd interact and like how much they weigh and how you hold them was a lot of fun, and I'm so impressed and pleased with how they have incorporated Ampersand into the show. You know, the show there's like a degree of grit to it and a degree of like reality in the
Uh-huh.
show. And, you know, having a pet monkey works in a particular way in the panels of a graphic novel. And it works so beautifully. That relationship is so beautifully drawn out in the graphic novel. But then when you're realizing it in 3 dimensions on screen, you know, there are certain adjustments that need to be made, and I think they're made really beautifully, and I'm really proud of that relationship.
That monkey, that character. I mean, he's just as big a character as anybody else, and he's CGI.
Totally,
But I love
totally.
how they show how much you care. Your character cares about that monkey, and it's
Yeah,
perfectly displayed in the earlier episodes when he goes into the subway and you
Yeah.
dive into that water, which I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I put myself in Yorick's shoes and I'm like, I love that monkey to death, but man, I don't know.
Yeah, I know it's a tough call. It's a tough call, man. I have to say it was so interesting when we shot that scene. It's they built this amazing water tank like on in the studio and like built a whole subway station and then flooded it, and it was one of the most impressive sets I've ever been in. But it's funny because they had to they heated up the whole studio, maybe not the whole studio, but they heated up like that whole corner of it because the crew was in the water like all day, and and so when we went to film it, it's supposed to be like the middle of the winter and all this disgusting water and all this stuff. And it was actually it was like a really nice, like warm bath. So actually the hardest part about shooting some of that stuff was like remembering that it's supposed to be uncomfortable. Um, but yeah, that was definitely an unforgettable day.
All right. So you mentioned Diane Lane earlier. She is the cast veteran on the set. What's she like? Is she great? I mean, she's been doing this for a very long time. Does she
Yeah,
help out the actors? Does she walk onto the set and her presence is immediately felt?
it is. It really is. She's like you said, she's been doing this a long, long time, and you can just really feel it. There's a leadership that she has that's not it's not forced. It's not self-serving. It's she's just got she's really earned a place of leadership, and
Mm-hmm.
she's very generous. She's a really extraordinarily generous actor, and that kind of when you walk on a set and you have someone who has that status and who leads by example and who sets the bar and who shows up and is the most prepared, is the most focused, like it really sets the tone for a set. And again, it wasn't a we're so lucky to have been working over the past year, and that, but that said, there were certain challenges that were came on through working in the middle of the pandemic, and it's a real testament to Diane kind of being the top of the food chain, that this cast got along so well and bonded so much and got so close. And yeah, she's just fantastic. We did a scene. There's a scene in episode three, the scene where she like we kind of first see each other, and it's she breaks a lot of news to Yorick and he's having trouble understanding everything, and but there's a moment where our director had said to me, she's like, Ben, I'd love for you to like reach over and grab Diane's hand at this moment. And it was a note to me that she gave, that we were like doing a
Mm-hmm.
wide, but she gave it up to me. And I was like, okay, cool, all right, kind of going through finding that moment. Okay, cool. And we go to do the scene, and the moment right before happens, and Diane just like she hadn't done it in any previous takes, but she just totally like broke down, and I naturally just reached over and reached out to her and took her hand, and I realized after we finished the take, I was like, oh my god, she heard the note that was given to me, and then she basically gave me an excuse, gave me a reason to reach out.
Wow.
And it was just such a moment of like, oh, that's what it's about. Like that's the degree of generosity, and in acting, it's like it's just passing the ball, and
Yeah.
she just served it up, and that was a really powerful moment, just as a collaborator for me. Um, I was like, oh, dude, I'm really lucky to be working with this person right now.
That is such that is an amazing
Yeah,
story. Now,
yeah.
season one of Y, for our viewers who don't know, is available on FX on Hulu. Now, it has not been picked up for a season two on FX on Hulu, which is well, that's another conversation. Um,
Yeah.
as many shows as it's happened in the past, they do
Mhm.
not get renewed on one network, and then another network sees the potential and picks it up. Before we get to that, when did you first find out the news that it wasn't being picked up for season two on FX?
Not long ago. Not long ago. Not long before it kind of came out, and yeah, man, it's sad. Like FX has been. I do have to say, FX has been so amazing and such. They've been amazing teammates, and FX on Hulu has been such an amazing home for the show. But we're really hopeful and really looking forward to the future for this show. Like we really believe in it, and it's a really special group of people who have come together to tell this story, and I feel so humbled and so grateful to be a part of it. And we're very hopeful, and yeah, very hopeful that it'll find a home elsewhere.
Now
Um,
this
there's so much story left to tell.
oh, absolutely. Now this show has received great critical acclaim. The fans
Mhm.
absolutely love it. I got to ask you this question. Do you think it just got lost in the overwhelming sea of content that viewers have available today? And that was part of the reason why it did not get picked up on FX for a season two?
Yeah, yeah. There's an interesting article that, and I try not to read too much about stuff that I'm involved in just because it can make one very self-conscious. But
Mm-hmm.
Amber Tamlin, one of our castmates, had sent it to me. There's a really interesting article in the Hollywood Reporter that talks about just kind of the intricacies of um, there's 1,001 flaming hoops that a show has to jump through to make it to broadcast. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
Then adding COVID to that, it just added 1,000 more. And there's a really interesting. I don't know if I can get into it too much, but I also don't like it's stuff that I try and like. A lot of it I tried to willfully just kind of
Put in its
put
box.
aside.
Yeah.
Exactly. But there's, a lot of things got drawn out because of COVID. This and that, and the time frame was not beneficial really to anyone to have to like make certain decisions in a very unrealistic amount of time. And so I think it was that. I think there's a bit of that, and I think also, to be honest, it's funny when we first started doing press for this. Um, some people would be like, "Hey, so why would you guys, why did you guys want to make a show about a pandemic in the middle of a pandemic?" And we're like, we started making this like way before.
Exactly.
This has been in the works for a long before that, and I think timing and circumstance are two things that are just never in your control.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think the I think people need. It's a show that like. I think the first episode fucking kicks ass.
Absolutely.
But I think for people who don't stick with it, who just kind of look at it or just read a synopsis, and it's like, oh my god, a plague or a pandemic. I think it can make people skittish, but it's so worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I'm just super hopeful that we find a home elsewhere
I
because
think
it's too good a group and it's too good a show.
I think
Yeah,
you will. I think you will. I
thanks,
think
man.
somebody will definitely pick it up. Now the
Thank you.
season finale is airing November 1st. Is
Monday.
that
Yeah, yeah, Monday.
okay? Cannot wait to see that. We are out of time. I want to thank you so much for giving us this time. I know you're a busy guy, and thank you so much. Again, guys, Why the Last Man is currently available on FX on Hulu for binge watching. So if you haven't watched it yet, I cannot recommend it anymore. I mean, it's amazing show. It's not just another contagion pandemic show. It's such a deep story from source material that came out a long, long time ago. Ben is the last man, and as we said in the title, Ben, thank you so much. Any final thoughts you want to share before we go?
Check out the show, guys. It's on FX on Hulu. I really hope you enjoy it. And John, this has been such a pleasure. I'm really glad we could make this work. I
Me
really
too.
appreciate it. I think the show kicks ass. And happy Halloween.
Happy
And
Halloween.
I really appreciate this, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I want to thank all of our viewers for tuning in. Thank you to Ben Schnetzer for being our guest. Till next time, guys, stay safe. And on behalf of Ben and myself, stay walking. Till later.
Take care, guys.